Llano, one of the oldest communities in the Antelope Valley, an Indian campground, then a pioneer settlement. The first Llano post office opened in 1891. In the early 1900s, Llano became a cooperative society that supported over 1,000 people. Writer Lionel Rolfe called Llano the Stonehenge of the Antelope Valley in tribute to the still standing ovens and kilns of that experiment in socialism. Llano was first an agricultural community. Then, in the 1950s, it became a refuge from the upheaval of Los Angeles urban living. It seemed an ideal haven, with vistas unblemished by the haze of smog and nightlights of a million stars whose visibility was not marred by commercial lighting. Over 500 families now make their permanent homes in Llano. Currently, 5 mining operations hope to locate in Llano. An executive for one of the companies said, "They won't see us, they won't hear us, they won't even be impacted by us. In fact, residents will find us a pleasant neighbor, if they notice us at all." The scope of these operations is vast. Millions of tons of rock will be excavated, crushed by grinders, coated with molten asphalt or mixed with cement, then hauled by hundreds of trucks over already hazardous highways. On both sides of Llano, neighbors will have an excellent view of the hideous work sites. Pleasant neighbors? Llano homeowners and landlords worry about a sharp decline in property values.
Doesn't seem right in the setting we have here for so many years, a beautiful place like this. Set a mining company right in the middle of us.
We feel that it's our job to ethically disclose to people that there's a possibility there will be a gravel pit. And I like to call it a gravel pit because I think that's what it is. Instead of this thing about surface mining and all the rest of it, it's a pit. There's going to be a hole in the ground. And it's going to cover hundreds of acres. But we feel it's our job to disclose that to people, and since that has happened, and I can't remember now if it's been 2 or 3 years, but people just don't buy. They don't buy in that area anymore.
Revenue generated by the mines will be offset by decline of new residential development and lowered property taxes. Proposed hours of operation are from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. Blast furnaces, conveyors, trucks, bulldozers, cement mixers, and rock crushers will decimate the absolute stillness we now enjoy. Noise in the desert carries for miles.
We have the noise. The state again has said that there is a certain amount of noise that is acceptable. We have no noise here. We have very little noise. We have coyotes at night, and they're rather charming, and they're not all the time. But they were going to have crushing of rock and the blasting from the burners of the asphalt plant every night, starting at 4 a.m. We have no noise. Suddenly, this is going to be an intrusion in our lives constantly.
Garish work lights from these projects on throughout the night will create a visual blight and diminish our views of the heaven. This area is prone to flash flooding. Project excavations are supposed to be entirely outside of the 100-year flood line. These project sites are in the middle of shifting flood channels.
These dips carry water during a flood, and they're full. And they'll move from time to time, depending where the water wants to go. There's no holding it back. You imagine 5 feet of water traveling through here, or more.
Number, I think it was around the mid-60s, 68, somewhere along in there. I was on Avenue S, and there's a wall of water about 3 feet high coming at me and about a quarter of a mile long. Now, they are south of T, and I'm on Avenue S, so what was it like at where their proposed plant site is? There would be considerable amount of water there.
The projects are within a few miles of the San Andreas Fault, the San Jacinto Fault, and the Llano Fault. The probability of these sites being affected by seismic activity is high. A major earthquake could cause oil spills or a gas tank rupture, which might contaminate pristine groundwater. These projects will each create mining pits over the size of 110 football fields to the depths of 165 feet, 10 feet above groundwater. Because the downward pressure of the rock is lessened as more excavation occurs, groundwater sometimes seeps into the bottom of these pits, waiting to be contaminated by the oil and gas stored on site.
Well, we're worried about that. We don't want to see them get within 10 feet of that water level. I think that's disastrous. As you probably know, that's the Palmdale aquifers right down there with about 5 billion acre feet of water in it, probably some of the finest water on earth. And we're not one of those who is overly enthusiastic about having that water table disturbed or polluted.
If it doesn't necessarily affect us, it's going to affect somebody, because a lot of people out here on wells. People further down on Big Rock Creek depend. They've got shallow wells out there that are running 80 to 100 feet, and if they do anything to interfere with the natural flow and interrupt that water table, these people are going to be out of luck. I mean, it's just, they're not going to have water, and what they do have is going to be so polluted that they're not going to be able to utilize it. So that's going to put a definite hardship on them.
Animals, small creatures, and a vast array of plant life are made homeless, torn up and bulldozed away. The barren area is left prey to erosion and siltation. Residents, who now live downwind of mining operations in Little Rock, complain bitterly about smells from asphalt patching and about dust in the air.
I'm going to specifically point out 3 pictures that I took of Granite Materials asphalt plant, February 2nd, 1995, mid-afternoon, dust coming from the plant. February 3rd, 1995, approximately 10 a.m., dust coming from their asphalt plant. And February 9th, mid-afternoon, dust coming from their asphalt plant. These pictures were not a plan that I set up or anything to take and sit out there and wait for this to happen. I just was carrying my camera in my car, and on the way to Palmdale, going down Avenue T, I would see this happening, so I would take a picture. Okay, on the morning of 11/15/95, I arrived south of Pear Blossom Highway, up on the hill next to the aqueduct, and that basically west of the plants in Little Rock. I started taking pictures at approximately 6:45 in the morning. It shows some dust emanating from the vicinity of the plants, which on Avenue T, based Calmat, and from early work trucks and so forth, and it shows the dust spreading north from a little bit of a breeze going from the south to the north. And these progressive shots show that it gets worse as the plants get into production around 7 o'clock.
Now, according to the study that was made here, the wind never seems to come toward our glider port. On the 9th, when I flew over this site, the wind was blowing exactly from the site right over the glider port. And to say that these trees that are going to be planted around the site, mostly on the north, the east, and the south side, are going to stop these particulates is dreaming. Of course, we who are commercial operators in this area that have a vested interest in particulates in the air coming from that area are concerned about it. We have a lot of canopies over here that are very sensitive to that kind of particle dirt, particle sand, particle rock, and it makes a lot of difference to our glass canopies that whether that stuff blows in here or whether it doesn't.
The creosote bushes along Highway 138 carry the potentially fatal valley fever virus that is stored in dust and dirt. Any excavation releases this dangerous virus into the air, where it is carried along to contaminate the people who live nearby. And according to the State Department of Agriculture, dust mites also have an adverse effect on crops. Highway 138 is locally known as Blood Alley because of the serious and fatal accidents which happen here regularly.
Problem with the traffic on Highway 138. The road there is very narrow. It's a narrow two-lane paved road. It has dirt shoulders, and the dirt shoulders are very narrow. There's just barely room for a car to park off the pavement. And I had a very unhappy proof of this several years ago. A friend of mine came to visit and brought her friend with her to help her drive. We had a nice visit, and when they left, unbeknownst to me, they turned on Highway 138 and went just far enough to be about opposite the location of Owl Rock and decided to change drivers. So they pulled over to the side of the road, and as the friend was getting out on the driver's side of the car, a pickup truck came along and was going too fast and wasn't able to compensate for the fact that somebody had opened a door and was stepping out actually out on the road. And he hit her, and she was killed. And this to me was an example of the kind of thing that can happen on that road. And with 350 truck trips a day, this is just going to increase the danger and the trouble that we have.
Many travelers along Highway 138 are curious about these ruins we see here. They date back to 1914, and there was a failed colony of socialists who lived and cultivated this area, and just a few feet off of Highway 138. And back in 1914 and 1918, that's about the time of the Model T, and I do believe that highway was designed for Model Ts. Today we have 18-wheelers rolling over it, people exceeding the speed limit, even though it's just gone up in California. This is unsafe at any speed.
It's a two-lane highway, and we have increasing amounts of traffic on it. Where they're going to and coming from, we don't know, but they are there, and they are very impatient. And very close to this area is the twin bridges, and that is double yellow lines in the middle. Double yellow lines in the middle over which you are not supposed to pass, but these impatient people do, because we have many, many campers, many, many trailers, and now we have the added trucks.
Mining projects are approved, over 1,000 truck trips per day will be added to an already dangerous highway. Yes, our children in slow-moving school buses will be making 28 trips per day in the midst of these 1,000 fully loaded trucks. Berms and foliage will not hide the smells, the sound, and dust emanating from these gravel pits. Look what was promised in Little Rock.
We have observed them in their operation at Little Rock, and they are not the best of neighbors. The trees that they planted down there, which was their agreement between them and Little Rock, that was one of the few things that Little Rock asked for, they're rather pathetic.
What starts as a local mining operation for the needs of the local community can turn into a national enterprise. The local resources scooped up, dumped in railroad cars, and shipped to distant markets. To protect their property from flooding, the existing plants on Avenue T in Palmdale have created gravel and rock berms in Little Rock Creek. But for the neighbors across the wash, dirt berms have been piled, eroding valuable property. Little Rock pumping stations for groundwater used to be 300 feet from the wash. Now they are 50 feet and are threatened by last year's rain. Mining comes in clusters, and these mining plants are out of sync with the Llano way of life. We do not want to become the Irwindale of Antelope Valley. Instead, we want to maintain the residential and agricultural heritage that this community owns.
Business attracts people not only from all over Southern California, but we attract people from all over the United States and from Europe as well. We've had people stop in, quite a few people stop in here from Europe that knew about our ultralight park from England, from Germany, and wanted to see what it was like, wanted to look at this beautiful California desert.
We feel that the people in this community like it this way, they'd like to keep it that way, and this would make a very dramatic change to our environment on the negative side.
There are many alternative locations for these pits. There are the communities that would welcome these mining enterprises. At the end of the 40-year life of these mines, they will leave gaping gashes in the earth.
I can see some enterprising person coming up and wanting to put in a landfill. Because you got to fill that hole with something. You can't just leave it there forever. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen here. Now, we're kind of here for the duration. This is where we want to spend the rest of our time. So we just might be around here long enough to see all these things.
Imagine the stench and the potential for poisoning the groundwater. Not a pleasant legacy for the real endangered species, our children and grandchildren. Not pleasant at all.